The decision to jump off the Hudson River Bridge. I didn't tell Elliot Worth. First, the doctor said that my illness is most likely incurable. Secondly, I know he doesn't actually love me. So that day, I said goodbye to him as usual. The man leaning against the door frame looked at me lazily. I said goodbye, Elliot. He raised an eyebrow. I left his world from that moment on. You look beautiful today. Have a good business trip. Come home early to see me. These are the 3 things Elliot Worth said to me this morning. He tilted his head, propped his chin up, and stared at me. He stared at me until I blushed, facing the sunlight. The man, who was sitting languidly, suddenly burst out laughing. He laughed so hard he was shaking, but his face was still as handsome and charismatic as ever. How many years have you been married, Lulu? Can you please stop blushing when I look at you? I stiffly grabbed the keys and fled. In the end, I couldn't tell him that I had decided to jump off the Hudson River Bridge, even though I know that even if I tell him, he still won't try to keep me. I'm dead, but it seems I can still think. I became a spirit and drifted there. I didn't know where else I could go, so I instinctively looked for where Elliot Worth was. So we arrived at a magnificent hotel venue. It's actually quite easy to spot him. Elliot Worth had an innate ability to draw attention to himself. He was the center of the crowd. It's always like this. It's very comfortable to be around him. He knows exactly how to make people like him, regardless of whether he ever gave his heart. Today should be a gala held by the organizers after he won that big prize. His career is now flourishing. As he came into the public eye, both his voice and appearance proved that this was his true calling. Elliot Worth is no longer the guy I used to squeeze into a tiny room in Brooklyn and busk at the Russ Sounds Lounge until he lost his voice. Professor Worth, I'd like to propose a toast to you. I hope we'll have many more opportunities to collaborate in the future. A girl in a long dress came over with a wine glass to offer a toast. Whether she stepped on her skirt, was pushed by someone, or was due to some undercurrent, she fell into his arms. He turned slightly to the side and supported the girl's waist. The moment the girl stood still, he withdrew his hand, and the wine glass was firmly held in his hand. The champagne spilled, leaving yellowish stains on his chest. There were also girls' lipsticks, bright and eye-catching. I'm so sorry. It's okay. He interrupted the girl, looked up, and met her eyes, which were slightly curved and smiling. Don't let this affect your mood tonight. Compared to me. He bent down slightly and blinked. It's even worse when a pretty girl's pretty dress gets dirty. Right? A sudden blush spread to the girl's ears. The man who had instigated all of this didn't seem to care. He nodded slightly, indicating that he needed to change into a suit and temporarily leave. But in the instant, he turned around and disappeared from everyone's sight. A deep sense of listlessness rose undisguisedly in his eyes, indifferent, irritable, and weary. I tilted my head and floated behind him, as expected. You're still putting on an act, Elliot Worth. He did not return to the venue after changing his clothes. Instead, he found a corner in the garden to smoke. I once saw a comment from a netizen about him. Elliot Worth is from heaven. He is like an angel, born with light. Actually, I think he belongs to the night. When he lets down his guard and removes his mask, he is anything but gentle. It could be described as harsh, indifferent, and even nasty. For example, when we're doing that, he likes to pull me in front of the mirror. They asked me what we were doing. They asked me who I was. They asked me to look at my reflection in the mirror and what I looked like. Looking into his dark eyes, I could only find a profound stillness and a sense of utter monotony. The cigarette smeared his face, and I saw him looking down at his phone. It turned out to be my chat interface. I think so. I haven't messaged him. I like to message him, whether he replies or not. If he replies, I'll be very happy. If he doesn't, I'll keep sending messages. So he told me he had set my messages to do not disturb. But I didn't even know I was pinned to his chat list. Our last contact was last night. I sent, look at these 2 cats. Don't they look like us? Look. This is just me, constantly rubbing against you. You'll only reply to me when you're in a better mood. I'm so disappointed. 10 minutes later, he replied to me from another room in the house. It doesn't look like it. These were the last 2 words he sent me. Our chat history ended there. He watched for a while, then turned off the screen. The sound of high heels approached him. Elliot Worth extinguished his cigarette and turned to look at the girl standing in front of him. Professor Worth, perhaps it's presumptuous of me, but I've always liked you. It was the girl who had just spilled champagne on him, under the bright moonlight. The girl's face was flushed slightly, as if she had been slightly tipsy before she mustered the courage to say those words. He looked down at the other person, his eyebrows curving slightly. The moonlight rippled in my eyes. Sorry. This is not my working hours, so how about we save these words for my fan meeting? He's always like that, leaving room for others. Even gentleness can be a dull knife that grinds down one's heart. The girl panicked. No, I didn't mean that kind of liking. It's more like, you must be drunk. This time, the girl was interrupted. His words were cold, and his eyes were cold too. The girl felt a little flustered by his gaze and quickly shook her head. No, I'm not drunk. If you're not drunk, I think you should be able to see the wedding ring on my finger clearly. Interrupted again, he raised his arm and waved his hand, showing it to the other person. The gleaming wedding ring on her finger drew a beautiful arc in the dark night sky. He turned away, ignoring the girl, and left her outside the door where the cold wind howled. This is unlike him. I thought he would pretend for a while longer. I floated behind Elliot Worth, peeking over. I saw him walk to a corner, open his phone, and fiddle with it for a while. After a while, he put the phone to his ear. Leaning against the wall, half of his face was hidden in the shadows. The number that was dialed was actually mine. The phone kept ringing until the last busy tone ended. I didn't reply. I think my phone has already sunk to the bottom of the river. This is the first time. Elliot Worth can't find me. I was absolutely certain that Elliot Worth liked me. Otherwise, why was he holding my hand when we escaped from that orphanage? I used to think that if I confessed to Elliot Worth, he would definitely be with me. Otherwise, why would he have given me all the good food during those days of hiding and fleeing? Elliot Worth and I came from the same Hope Harbor orphanage when I was 6. Elliot Worth took me and ran away. The director of that orphanage said I was a dog and made me eat like a dog. The day Elliot Worth took me away, I felt like I cried all the tears I could ever cry in my life. He pulled me into his arms, his voice light and airy. I don't like to coax people. You'll have me from now on, so don't cry anymore. From now on, my world consists only of Elliot Worth. Later, Elliot Worth said he had found someone who could support us. The tall, thin man sized me up and then said, "All right, you'll have to send this girl to school." Then she flashed him a set of yellowed teeth. "You'll have to work for me." The man adopted me. From then on, I was able to go to school. Elliot Worth didn't go to school. He followed that man, leaving early and returning late every day. I don't know what they're doing, from my perspective. It's only natural to think so. Elliot Worth gave up his studies for me. He was willing to give up everything for me. And when he ran away, the only person he held on to was me. I've started to like Elliot Worth more and more, and I can't help but like him more and more. With the arrival of puberty, his facial features became more and more refined and beautiful. He loves to laugh, and everything he does has an attractive quality. He strode across the school gate with his long legs, always attracting the attention of a lot of girls. People keep asking me for his contact information. I shook my head and said I didn't know, wondering why he was always so popular. All my memories of middle school are about him, enveloped in the bittersweet feeling of unrequited love. Until one summer when the cicadas sang their praises, I leaned against the windowsill of the old rental room and tore open the popsicle wrapper. He had just finished showering and was coming out of the bathroom while drying his hair. Water droplets gently traced the grooves of his abdominal muscles, perfectly and alluringly outlined by the setting sun. I was so stunned that I forgot to eat the newly opened popsicle. The sugar water dripped onto the ground until someone else appeared before me. He moved closer to me, very close. Then he stuck out his tongue and licked the tip of the popsicle from the bottom. Others watched me lick, the setting sun falling on those beautiful amorous peach blossom eyes. Days, if you won't eat the popsicle, I will, until his slightly itchy sound reached my ear canal. He has already snatched the popsicle. I stared at the corners of his pink lips. I can't take it anymore. I tackled him to the bed, pinned him down, and the popsicle slipped off and hit the wooden floor. I tried to kiss him haphazardly, but he turned his head away, breathing heavily. We looked at each other. "I like you," I said. He raised his chin slightly, speaking softly. "What? I like you." I repeated it again. The setting sun filled his eyes, and he slowly looked away. "Feel sorry." I stared at his profile. It was so handsome it almost broke my heart. "I think I've made you misunderstand." He put me on trial. I questioned my angel. "If you don't like me, why are you so nice to me?" "It's all right. I treat everyone the same." "Then why did you save me in the first place, and hold my hand?" "Because you were sleeping closest to the escape window. I could only save one person. Why am I the only one allowed to go to school? Because I don't like going to school. He was serious and open, without hiding anything. And the beautiful sunset reflected in his eyes. It set the stage for something. This is the prelude to my decade-long relentless pursuit of Elliot Worth. Elliot Worth called me 3 times. I didn't answer any of them. Of course, I couldn't accept it. My body might have already drifted off somewhere. The party was almost over. It was already late at night. He stared at his phone screen for a long time, then changed his number and continued dialing. I saw it. It belonged to my boss. "Hello, Ms. Carter. I'm so sorry to bother you so late." His voice is suitable for singing, and also for speaking. It is gentle and pleasant to listen to, so that the listener cannot get angry. "I am Luna Moore's husband. I wanted to ask if everything went smoothly for her business trip with you today." "Oh. Are there any business trips scheduled for the department recently?" "I understand. Not at all. It's me who's responsible, and Lulu is entirely thanks to you." What followed were all polite exchanges. He gave a perfunctory reply, his writing impeccably neat and without any flaws. His eyes, however, were as dark as the night. He was talking on the phone while walking, and even hailed a taxi along the way. The driver asked him where he was going. He hung up the phone, looked up, and said 3 words, "Police station." "He wants to report me missing." The police told him that he could not report a missing person if the disappearance had not been reported for at least 24 hours. Uncle Tony, who had come to report his stolen electric scooter, was sitting at the entrance. Hearing this, they came over to join in the fun. "Hey, if you ask me, young man, your girlfriend and you two must have had a fight, right? He ran away in a huff, and he's so angry he won't answer your calls. Isn't that normal?" Elliot Worth and Uncle Tony sat together in front of the Greenwich police station. He was also wearing a suit, which seemed somewhat out of place with the atmosphere here. His eyes were beautiful, but they seemed somewhat empty at that moment, as Tony exclaimed in shock, "Hey, wow, aren't you that singer? The one who's really famous lately?" He said to himself. "She won't ignore my calls." He opened his mouth, his expression natural, and the car lights on the street reflected in his pupils, so beautiful that they shimmered like dazzling neon lights. He said it as naturally as if he were saying 1 + 1 = 2. "She can even reply to my messages while she's taking a shower." It's true. During my most innocent and loving year, I did all sorts of silly things for Elliot Worth. My senior year of high school was the most stressful time of preparing for the college entrance exam. I can even spare the time to study recipes for Elliot Worth, because I heard a saying from somewhere, "The way to a man's heart is through his stomach." This resulted in different dishes being served every time he came home. I patiently recorded his tastes and preferences, and then adjusted the recipes for the next meal I made for him. He said he doesn't like to coax others. I'll take care of him and comfort him. So I helped him remove the fish bones, peel the shrimp, and warm the milk to the perfect temperature. That day, he went home for dinner as usual. It was 3 dishes and a soup. While his classmates were studying their homework every day, I was studying the recipes. I was convinced that they were all his favorite dishes. That day he put down his chopsticks and looked at me with a smile. "Luna Moore. The shrimp was too salty." I nodded. "Okay, I'll make it lighter next time." "The soup is too strong in flavor, really? I thought you preferred a stronger drink." "The scrambled eggs with tomatoes are too spicy." It wasn't until he said his last sentence that I realized something was wrong. I hadn't put in a single chili pepper. Besides, I just tasted all the dishes, and there was clearly nothing wrong with them. He looked me over in a very comfortable sitting position. I felt a little disappointed. "Don't you like my cooking anymore?" "Luna Moore." He called my name again. He looked up at me, the light casting a beautiful arc on his nose and brow bone. His words were soft and gentle, almost like he was being coquettish. "My shoulders are so sore." I immediately got up and went behind him to massage him. "Is this force okay?" As I gently rubbed his neck with my thumb, I asked him softly. "That part of his neck is only partially exposed, but it's very beautiful. I always thought that Elliot Worth was just as good as those big stars on TV." "Luna Moore. Clean the kitchen after you finish eating?" "Good. The dishes are washed." "Good," I responded. "Transfer another 20,000 yuans to me." I stopped what I was doing. 20,000 yuan. "I don't have that much right now." I lowered my head and asked him cautiously, "Can I transfer the money to you after I go to university and start earning it?" The flickering lights reflected in his eyes. All beings are formless, yet in the radiant pupils of Elliot Worth, I can never find anything. He suddenly smiled, reached out, and touched me. It was just a brief touch, on the face. Then immediately separated. Then he said, "Luna Moore, please step out for a moment. I want to smoke." I waited obediently at the entrance of the building. The autumn evening breeze was just right, and I could count the stars, but when I counted the 67th star, he still hadn't let me go home. Finally, I pushed open the door to my house. There was not a trace of smoke in the room. The kitchen curtains swayed gently, and the cupboards were all washed and neatly stacked. There was a piece of paper and an envelope on the table. His handwriting was on the paper. It was very neat. "I don't know when he practiced it. Do your best on the exam. It's okay if you don't do well. I'm leaving. I won't be coming home for the next few months. Don't look for me. You won't find me." I opened the envelope and looked down to count the contents. Scattered and piled together, 20,000 yuan. I did quite well on the college entrance exam that year. I was already the top student in the whole school, and I performed exceptionally well in the college entrance examination. Very few people in our small county can get that score, but I'm not happy at all. Until Elliot Worth returned, he reported the person who adopted us. That person was the leader of a large pickpocketing organization in the area. Back then, the punishment was severe. They could be imprisoned for life. I heard that the man spat at Elliot Worth in court and cursed him so badly that he lost everything, unfortunately. Elliot Worth never had parents. Elliot Worth, however, acted as if nothing had happened and brought me back a gift. "Congratulations on turning 18 and getting into the school I wanted." That was the second time I confessed my feelings to him. He was smoking next to me, looking down at me. She said, "Hey, Luna Moore, can you please stop bringing up things that are hard to swallow?" Elliot Worth called me again. My phone is switched off this time. This seems to be the first time I haven't replied to his messages for almost 24 hours. In the past, I wouldn't have made him wait even a second. He's going through our chat history again. What's so interesting about this? It's all the messages I sent him. "I am bored, Elliot Worth. What are you doing? Stay with me. I like you. Don't ignore me. Scumbag." It always ends with me rebuking him. Sometimes he replies, sometimes he doesn't. I don't mind these things, and he's already used to them. I'm used to him making his presence known, used to me biting his collarbone when he holds me in his arms. "Elliot Worth, can't you care about me even a little bit?" And this time, he slid to the bottom. I haven't replied to that message he sent me for 5 hours. His 2 green boxes in the interface are very eye-catching. "We agreed to go home early tonight. Lulu, you're really late." During my university years, Elliot Worth and I worked in the same city. We lived together. The rent is very cheap, and the neighborhood is quite dilapidated. There's a rooftop terrace where Elliot Worth and I often like to spend the evenings. "Elliot Worth, what kind of girl do you actually like?" At that time, I asked him about his ideal type. He leaned against the railing, lounging lazily, and turned to shield me from the howling autumn wind. Half of his handsome face was bathed in the glow of the setting sun. "They must be rich. Someone who can support me, doesn't need me to coax them, and is easy to take care of. Tsk. I hate girls who cry all the time." I have no doubt that Elliot Worth's life goal is to find a rich woman to support him. He doesn't seem to have any lofty ambitions, or rather, he's the kind of person who can get most things with a snap of his fingers. But since then, my favorite thing to do in college has become make money. My brain is quite good at learning. What takes others 2 or 3 minutes to figure out, I can do in a few dozen seconds. It didn't take long for me to get a job at a company run by my seniors. After that, I started to become very rich. I remember that day was Elliot Worth's birthday. On a snowy night, I presented him with the cake I had bought for him, a cake that cost 3,459 yuans. I felt that this was truly a cake that only the wealthy could afford. "Elliot Worth." I pulled out stacks of red banknotes from my pocket. My salary for the past few months, a lot of it. They were piled up in front of him. "Look, I've become very rich. I can make things less difficult for you." Until the sound of sirens grew louder and louder. The colorful red and blue lights illuminated the snow, but I still followed his eyes. "Elliot Worth, can you have a bite of your birthday cake? This is something I've been preparing for a very, very long time." Happy birthday, Elliot Worth." I was arrested by the police. The company I was involved with is suspected of illegal fundraising and tax evasion. As the legal representative registered at the time, I was the first to be arrested. I heard that the senior students had all fled and disappeared, and I was the only one who was caught. At that time, I realized that perhaps their enthusiastic recruitment of me into the company was just to make me the legal representative. I don't really want to recall the days I spent in the detention center. In short, the senior students were also caught later. Because I preserved enough evidence in advance, I will not be sentenced. On the day I was released from the detention center, Elliot Worth came to pick me up. His gaze remained unchanged, but I became less talkative, and he reached out and covered me with his coat. I got on the bus. He asked me as if we had never been apart. Want to go get hot pot? I often try to find something in Elliot Worth's eyes. Unfortunately, none of them were there. In the hot pot restaurant, I looked at his face through the slowly rising steam from the boiling pot. I never knew there were people whose eyelashes were so long that the shadows covered their lower eyelids. Lulu, he called me. My heart followed the ups and downs of the tripe on his chopsticks as he listlessly picked it up and down. About you being arrested. Let me make this clear beforehand, I'm not responsible. He rested his chin on his hand and looked at me. His beautiful eyes were simply beautiful. His eyes and brows seemed to be smiling, a blend of gentleness and aloofness. Don't try to morally blackmail me, officer. I'm in trouble. I think something might have really happened to my loved one. This was the third time Elliot Voss had looked up at his watch before speaking to the police officer on duty at the front desk. Sir, the other person is an adult capable of independent action. We have recorded your report. However, perhaps their phone is out of battery or they are in an area with poor signal. Please don't worry too much. Upon receiving this answer, I saw a look of confusion in Elliot Worth's eyes for the first time. Our situation is a bit special. I'm very important to my lover. She wouldn't ignore my messages. I just searched our chat history. Officer, I don't know if this can be used as evidence, but she has never been more than 5 hours late in replying to my messages. Sorry, I guess shared power banks are very common these days. The police officers had already begun to handle their official duties with wry smiles and their heads down. Tony, the guy who lost his electric scooter, seemed eager to stir things up and joined in. You two just had a fight, didn't you? And what was that about how important I am? See, your wife just doesn't want you anymore. Elliot Worth paused, about to retort, when a gust of autumn wind swept through the door that wasn't fully closed. He seemed to sense something, paused for a moment, and looked behind him. At the same time, the police emergency call went off at the front desk. Greenwich Police Station. Hello, an unidentified female corpse has been found at Eastwood Lake. I'd like to confirm if anyone has been reported missing recently. I want to see Elliot Worth cry. I also want to see how he initially can't believe it when he finds out I'm dead. Then he checked repeatedly. Then tears streamed down his face and fell on my body. Then he held my body and wept bitterly. Okay, I know that's impossible. Just like when I gave Elliot Worth 100 flowers, not one of them touched his heart. After graduating from university, I had an incident where I was arrested and detained. Fortunately, the evidence I have preserved does prove that I had no connection with the company's illegal activities at the time. With the strong support of my supervisor, it had no impact on my subsequent application for postgraduate studies. During my graduate studies, I became obsessed with sending flowers to Elliot Worth. Roses, Chinese roses, baby's breath. I know it might seem a bit strange, but back then, my hobby was really to send him all sorts of beautiful and vibrant flowers. It takes me 45 minutes by electric scooter from my Northwood Institute dormitory to Elliot Worth's apartment, and I do it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, rain or shine. This is a champagne rose. This is a white lisianthus. This is a daisy. I held up the bouquet of flowers and pointed it out to him, but he was looking at me, his long eyelashes dripping down. It lazily cast a shadow. As I continued my incessant explanation, I just wanted to talk to him a little longer. He finally leaned forward and took the bouquet of flowers from my hands. Okay, sure, thank you. His movements were fluid and natural. Even the way they locked me out was the same. Wait, Elliot Worth. This time, I clung to the door frame and looked up at him. Please don't send me away, I sniffed. I miss you so much. What's the difference between not letting me see you and killing me? Elliot Worth let me into his house. I looked around at this place I had never set foot in before. After the separation, the apartment he rented was very small, less than a quarter the size of our research institute's dormitory, but it was very clean, and his guitar, which he had been playing for a long time, was leaning against the table. He sat on the single sofa by the floor-to-ceiling window. The lighting was perfect and unbiased. I saw him looking down, carefully arranging the bouquet of flowers I had given him. You didn't throw away the flowers I sent you? I leaned closer to look, and I couldn't even remember how many flowers I had given him, but he should know, because each bouquet has a vase. And then they are sorted and managed. Elliot Worth even bought them a flower stand. Because I like flowers, he said. He did these things with practiced ease, unpacking the packaging and trimming the roots, until I pinned him against the flower stand. Do you like flowers? Or do you like me for sending them? I feel uncomfortable if I don't flirt with him every day. I tilted my head and asked him. He casually placed that beautiful bouquet of champagne roses between us. The dim fragrance discordantly quickened my heartbeat. I've confessed my feelings like this countless times without blushing or my heart skipping a beat, until he leaned closer and whispered in my ear, "You." At one point, my heart rate soared to 180, turning as red as that delicate, ripe rose in the corner. He raised his hand and gently smoothed the hair at my temple with his knuckles. He laughed in front of me, who was basically completely out of control. His smile is so beautiful, gentle and romantic. Let's have a day of romance. Luna Moore, he said, staring into my eyes, the romantic light turning serious and cruel. Well, break up after just one day of dating. I've dreamt countless times about being in love with Elliot Worth anyway. He's very gentle, kind, and good at taking care of people. But I clearly overestimated myself. He took my hand and we walked. I was so nervous that I couldn't speak. The one-day romance began as the sun set behind the buildings. Our first stop was the Fenglin Historical District, which is particularly famous in our city. Girlfriend, are you feeling hot? A can of ice-cold Coke was pressed against my cheek. I sat with him in the bustling crowd watching the performance. She blushes whenever she sees me. He suddenly leaned closer to me, his handsome face suddenly looming large. He's so handsome it's almost lethal. I suddenly discovered something terrifying. I looked at him with half my face covered by a scarf. He tilted his head and subtly brushed his index finger against the tip of my finger. Although I have a lot of experience pursuing people, but I have absolutely no idea how to date. Then I saw him smiling. The performance seemed to be reaching its climax, with a surge of voices from the audience. All I could hear was a lot of noise around me, and people were making a fuss. It took me a long time to realize that it was a moving camera for the performance. They found us. The screen projected a picture of me and him. Give me a kiss. Give me a kiss. The crowd erupted in cheers, and fireworks lit up the night sky. Elliot Worth straightened my scarf, as my heart pounded in my ears and I frantically abandoned all defenses. He pulled my scarf over and kissed me through it. I've heard of a theory. The reason why those high-end dishes are considered delicious is, it's because the amount presented each time is extremely small. When you want a little more, it's gone. For me, this is what dating for a day is like. Elliot Worth is a particularly beautiful painting, but it was painted with a disappearing pen. But he also told me that I would follow him with the fading handwriting until he completely disappeared. The next day, Elliot Worth and I went to Starlight Amusement Park. Every time I turned around, he was looking at me. I think Elliot Worth really has a knack for being a good boyfriend. When he's serious about coaxing someone, he can make them very happy. As we were leaving the park, we took a Polaroid photo. Hey, you two could stand a little closer together. The staff member held up a camera and smiled at us. Before I could react, he put his arm around my waist. Girlfriend. The pale light of the setting sun fell on his eyebrows and eyes. When I looked up, all I could see was his superior jawline. Look at the camera. As the shutter clicked, the sun had already sunk below the mountains. After leaving the park, we walked one in front of the other. We arrived by electric scooter, and he sat on the back of the scooter without any hesitation. Give me a ride. He looked up at me, the lingering feeling lightly settling in his eyes. I'm tired, Lulu. I was driving my electric scooter, with him on the back, riding along the road. I asked him, is today over? Yes. Then are you still my boyfriend? Do you think so? If you ask me what I think, then I think it's. I suddenly felt him press his forehead against my back. Don't do that. Amidst the sound of the wind, I heard him say that some beautiful and joyful things are limited in number. Once you've finished the experience, that's it. Elliot Worth, will you not have it either? He didn't answer me. I thought he was just too lazy to talk to me, or he was too tired. My questions were too boring, until I stopped at a traffic light intersection. Oh, little girl. And Annie, who was waiting at the red light at the same intersection as me, called out to me. The one behind you. I turned around and looked, but because of my movement, the person behind me fell off the electric scooter. Elliot Worth. I called out to him. His eyes were closed, as if he were asleep, and he did not move. I ran out of the car and shook his shoulder. Elliot Worth. Elliot Worth. I fumbled haphazardly in my pockets, my hands trembling, looking for my phone, until the numbers 120 were dialed. I then realized my fingers wouldn't obey me, and I had to type it several times. This is a brain tumor. The lights at Greenwich General Hospital always give off a sense of emptiness. I stared at the image before me, unable to understand it. Even though I was listening to Dr. Henderson, I still couldn't understand what he was saying. The imaging suggests it's low grade, but whether it has already become malignant requires craniotomy for pathological examination to make a final determination. What do you mean? If it gets worse, will people die? I asked, somewhat bewildered. The probability of death is very high, so a biopsy should be performed as soon as possible. There is a small hemorrhage in the pericranial cavity. The intracranial pressure has temporarily decreased, but I still recommend surgery as soon as possible. Are you a family member of the patient? The doctor's gaze fell on me. I paused for a moment and said, no, I am his friend. Have the patient's family come and sign a surgical consent form. The autumn wind blew through the window panes, causing the green plants on the doctor's desk to flutter gracefully. I'm sorry, doctor. I felt a slightly bitter taste spreading across my tongue. Neither he nor I have family. When I walked into the ward, Elliot Worth was sitting on the bed watching me. I don't know if his yo was a greeting or something else. This is the first time in my life I've ever wanted to hit him. Elliot Worth. I stood in front of him and looked at him. Do you know you're going to die? His gaze remained calm. Is that so? Did the doctor tell you that it would hurt if I died? I'm a little afraid of pain, Elliot Worth. He reached out and gently wiped away the tears that rolled down my cheek. He laughs with great interest. The one who should die is me, not you. Are you crying like this to mourn for me in advance? This joke isn't funny at all. My tears flowed more and more freely. His expression grew increasingly bewildered. I know he hates people who cry, but I also hate myself for not being able to control my tears. Elliot Worth. His voice should have a slightly upturned tone at the end. Let's get married, I said. The doctor said the surgical consent form must be signed by a family member. The only status I can give you right now is that of your wife, at the Civil Affairs Bureau. I explained the reason behind my astonishing 5 words. He sat obediently beside me, casually folded a paper crane from a brochure issued by the Civil Affairs Bureau, and placed it behind my ear. It looks pretty good, he smiled with satisfaction. We were the last couple to receive our marriage certificate before the Civil Affairs Bureau closed for the day. I opened it and took a look. A wedding photo of 2 people against a red background. I felt awkward and didn't dare to look directly at the camera. Elliot Worth, on the other hand, seemed to have it written all over his face. I'm getting married today. I'm so happy. Actually, you could already see the signs back then. He really has a good sense of the camera. After returning to the hospital, Elliot Worth had to prepare for surgery, although it was a craniotomy. The doctor told me that the risk was not high if it was just a biopsy, but if it is diagnosed as a malignant tumor, Elliot Worth, can you please not die? The night before the surgery, I held his hand. Dying as a virgin, Elliot Worth, don't you think your life was a waste? He looked at me with a smile and unceremoniously pulled his hand out of my palm. He patted my head. Good night. See you the day after tomorrow. I did see him the day after tomorrow. The surgery went smoothly. The tumor was benign, and the doctor removed it without any problems. Elliot Worth was fine. I hid the excess sleeping pills I had prepared back into my possession. During the time he was hospitalized after surgery, I tried my best to cook delicious meals for him. There was an older woman in the next bed who had just undergone tumor removal surgery. Wow. This young man is destined for a life of luxury. My wife is so good. I was indeed a little too cautious with Elliot Worth's handling of the ingredients. Moreover, after so many years of cooking for Elliot Worth, my culinary skills have reached a point where all my fellow students praise them. It was all thanks to Elliot Worth's fussiness and his particularly picky taste. During the few days he was hospitalized, we got along fairly normally. He didn't mention marriage, so I happily pretended it never happened. Then until the day he was discharged from the hospital, I finished his discharge procedures, and he was waiting for me at the door with his bags. His hair had grown a little longer these past few days, which made his deep-set brow bones appear both aloof and melancholic. I happened to catch a few little girls secretly taking pictures of him from a slightly distant spot. I called out to him. He hummed in agreement. I went up to him and started our usual pointless conversation. What do you want to eat? Beef noodles, please. Which company is it? The one on Easton Road? Haven't eaten there in ages. Let's go. I ate Easton Road beef noodles with Elliot Worth when I was in college. He didn't raise the price even when he was a graduate student. There's a row of chairs by the window, facing the window, where you can see outside. Passersby hurried by. and the setting sun hid in the shadows. When the food arrived, Elliot Worth picked up the egg and gave it to me. He didn't like eggs, but I did, as did the milk. So, from childhood, my family only needed to buy one serving of eggs and milk. That's how we spend most of our time together. They didn't talk much. I like these moments. There's a luxurious feeling to it. Like I've wasted so much time with Elliot Worth. Through the window, I heard dogs barking. It sounded like two unfamiliar dogs were fighting. The owner couldn't hold it back, and the ground was covered in fur. To enjoy the melon, we both slowed down our noodle slurping. As I looked around, I felt like something was placed next to me, a box made of velvet. I took it and opened it. A diamond ring is quietly shimmering with tiny sparkles. The wedding was a bit rushed. There wasn't even a proposal. He was still eating his noodles, not looking at me, as if he were talking about something very ordinary. It's as commonplace as saying I snagged a discounted cabbage at the supermarket today. Luckily, I held your hand before and know your size. Would you like to try it on? I don't know if you'll like it. Then he withdrew the ring finger that I was holding onto. I'm not asking you to put it on me. Are you planning to propose to me? I tilted my head. Actually, that's always been what I thought. He grabbed my wrist, then the ring finger was secured, and the ring was pushed up, fitting perfectly. The shimmering light of the diamonds dispelled the shadows in one corner. I think it's so beautiful. If I could travel through time, I would definitely take my camera with me. Then I took 100 photos of him holding my hand. Oh, but unfortunately, I almost forgot. I am already dead. I suddenly felt a bit cold and couldn't quite control my spirit. I think this might mean that I'm really going to disappear completely. Elliot Worth got into the police car from the police station, and I floated behind him. The police car lights blared, and the colorful neon lights reflected in his eyes. He rested his chin on his hand, staring out the window. I sat next to him. I know he can't hear my voice or feel me, but I still want to say to him, I'm sorry. I tilted my head back, and the red and blue lights of the police car almost made me transparent. Elliot Worth, I really don't know how to go on living. I forget which few days or months after I married Elliot Worth, I was diagnosed with depression. It wasn't so obvious before. Until those days when somatization symptoms started to appear. I feel dizzy, my vision goes black, and then I always experience sudden heart palpitations. What's even more terrifying is that I can no longer feel happiness. I used to be so happy when I managed to snag the last discounted mini cake before the store closed. No matter what I do, I can't feel any happiness. When I received that report of severe depression, I hesitated for almost a second. Doctor, I'm living a perfectly good life, so why would I have depression? There are many causes of depression. It's not just about immediate psychological trauma, but also delayed traumatic reactions, and even genetic factors. You already have somatization symptoms. You should take this seriously. Where are your family members? I just don't understand. In the hospital corridor, I stared at the report in front of me. Tears streamed down my face. One drop at a time. Why? My life is getting better. I was promoted to head of the research lab this year. And recently more and more music companies and agents have been contacting Elliot Worth. My life with him is getting better and better. He's starting to accept me less and doesn't always reject me anymore. After I finish showering, he will effortlessly pull me into his arms and blow dry my hair. He would prepare gifts for me on holidays, bring me an umbrella on rainy days, and pick me up from get off work. Why am I starting to feel no joy? When I got home, I opened the front door. You're back. I made scones. I don't know if you'll like them. Elliot Worth was stroking his chin in thought. Then he looked at me and smiled. Would you be willing to be the first to test the poison? I'm scared. I'm afraid these days will disappear. I hate myself for getting this disease at this time. I remember scrolling through posts about depression on my way home. As a friend of someone with depression, you could very well become depressed yourself because of them. Don't date someone with depression. The world of people with depression is terrifying. They're always crying and need to be comforted. I just can't understand it. Elliot Worth disliked girls who always needed him to coax them. I took off my shoes and walked into the entryway. He rolled up his sleeves and grabbed a freshly baked loaf of bread from the oven. Smile at him. Let me try it and see what's going on. From then on, I wore a mask called a smile. I started having sleepless nights, unable to fall asleep. When a person starts to think, it's easy for them to get stuck on a single point. I can't understand so many things. I don't know why I developed depression. I've overcome so many things before. So why can't I get over this one? So painful. I was the last one to leave the lab. A light drizzle was falling on the street. I looked up at the large screen in the shopping mall across the street. It was a New Year's Eve variety show. And Elliot Worth was invited on. Oh, he's quite famous now. Although he himself doesn't care about these things, I think I've heard his agent, Jack, mention them. He was still eating his noodles, not looking at me, as if he were talking about something very ordinary. It's as commonplace as saying I snagged a discounted cabbage at the supermarket today. Luckily, I held your hand before and know your size. Would you like to try it on? I don't know if you'll like it. Then he withdrew the ring finger that I was holding onto. I'm not asking you to put it on me. Are you planning to propose to me? I tilted my head. Actually, that's always been what I thought. He grabbed my wrist, then the ring finger was secured. And the ring was pushed up, fitting perfectly. The shimmering light of the diamonds dispelled the shadows in one corner. I think it's so beautiful. If I could travel through time, I would definitely take my camera with me. Then I took 100 photos of him holding my hand. Oh. But unfortunately, I almost forgot. I am already dead. I suddenly felt a bit cold and couldn't quite control my spirit. I think this might mean that I'm really going to disappear completely. Elliot Worth got into the police car from the police station, and I floated behind him. The police car lights blared, and the colorful neon lights reflected in his eyes. He rested his chin on his hand, staring out the window. I sat next to him. I know he can't hear my voice or feel me, but I still want to say to him, I'm sorry. I tilted my head back, and the red and blue lights of the police car almost made me transparent. Elliot Worth, I really don't know how to go on living. I forget which few days or months after I married Elliot Worth, I was diagnosed with depression. It wasn't so obvious before. Until those days when somatization symptoms started to appear. I feel dizzy, my vision goes black, and then I always experience sudden heart palpitations. What's even more terrifying is that I can no longer feel happiness. I used to be so happy when I managed to snag the last discounted mini cake before the store closed. No matter what I do, I can't feel any happiness. When I received that report of severe depression, I hesitated for almost a second. Doctor, I'm living a perfectly good life, so why would I have depression? There are many causes of depression. It's not just about immediate psychological trauma, but also delayed traumatic reactions, and even genetic factors. You already have somatization symptoms. You should take this seriously. Where are your family members? I just don't understand. In the hospital corridor, I stared at the report in front of me. Tears streamed down my face. One drop at a time. Why? My life is getting better. I was promoted to head of the research lab this year. And recently more and more music companies and agents have been contacting Elliot Worth. My life with him is getting better and better. He's starting to accept me less and doesn't always reject me anymore. After I finish showering, he will effortlessly pull me into his arms and blow dry my hair. He would prepare gifts for me on holidays, bring me an umbrella on rainy days, and pick me up from get off work. Why am I starting to feel no joy? When I got home, I opened the front door. You're back. I made scones. I don't know if you'll like them. Elliot Worth was stroking his chin in thought. Then he looked at me and smiled. Would you be willing to be the first to test the poison? I'm scared. I'm afraid these days will disappear. I hate myself for getting this disease at this time. I remember scrolling through posts about depression on my way home. As a friend of someone with depression, you could very well become depressed yourself because of them. Don't date someone with depression. The world of people with depression is terrifying. They're always crying and need to be comforted. I just can't understand it. Elliot Worth disliked girls who always needed him to coax them. I took off my shoes and walked into the entryway. He rolled up his sleeves and grabbed a freshly baked loaf of bread from the oven. Smile at him. Let me try it and see what's going on. From then on, I wore a mask called a smile. I started having sleepless nights, unable to fall asleep. When a person starts to think, it's easy for them to get stuck on a single point. I can't understand so many things. I don't know why I developed depression. I've overcome so many things before. So why can't I get over this one? So painful. I was the last one to leave the lab. A light drizzle was falling on the street. I looked up at the large screen in the shopping mall across the street. It was a New Year's Eve variety show. And Elliot Worth was invited on. Oh, he's quite famous now. Although he himself doesn't care about these things, I think I've heard his agent, Jack, mention them. My eyes were wide open, and I saw twinkling lights on the shore. There were onlookers as well as ambulances and police cars, their lights flashing red and blue. Don't give up. Someone made a circle with their hands and shouted at me. Finally, it was dragged onto land, and it seemed to be unable to make a sound. coughing desperately after a long while. He managed to squeeze out a single syllable, cold. Then I was held very, very tightly in someone's arms. It seems a little warmer now, but my head still feels heavy. The person holding me is Elliot Worth. He really did come wearing a suit shirt, but now it was completely soaked. Oh, shouldn't he be receiving an award? He was holding me, and I rested my chin on his shoulder. Looking into the distance, we saw medical staff carrying stretchers running towards us. Lulu, his voice was damp with the scent of the river. He called out to me, and we were separated by the medical staff. I was placed on a stretcher, and I was still holding onto his hand. The evening star is sleepless. It is watching me. He leaned closer to me and looked at me very seriously. Luna Moore, I never thought of giving up on you, so don't give up on me either. He gently scraped away the river water that had dampened his bangs with his thumb. I blinked and slowly began to think. Looking up, I saw a few stars twinkling in the night sky. After a long, long time, I suddenly realized, so I was crying. I didn't manage to die. I was saved by Elliot Worth. Elliot Worth rescued him again. When did Elliot Worth find out that Luna Moore had depression? It was about 2 years ago when she started to often zone out. He unscrewed a bottle of milk and handed it to her, and she stood there stunned. He found it a bit funny and used the milk to cool the other person's skin. What are you thinking about? The other party, however, shrank back like a startled rabbit. Elliot Worth has a knack for being able to keenly sense changes in the other person's emotions. That's probably his talent. He knew Lulu was unhappy almost instantly. If you're unhappy, just make the other person happy. Elliot Worth was perfectly capable of doing this kind of thing. But then he discovered Lulu was unhappy no matter what, even though the girl was smiling at him. He knew it wasn't a genuine smile from her. It's as if he was coaxed. He patted her head and then kept the matter to himself. The opportunity actually came about one day when he was at home and Lulu asked him to help deliver a document to the company. When he was looking for the document for her, he found 2 boxes of medicine that she had hidden deep inside the cabinet. A quick search reveals that it's a medication for treating depression. The next day, he hugged her from behind as she changed her clothes and was about to leave. Lulu's body is a bit sensitive. She freezes and can't move whenever she touches him. His kisses travel down her earlobe. Seeing her resolute expression, I managed to stammer out, Elliot Worth, should we do it? Should I take the day off? He slipped the 2 boxes of medicine into her hand. He gently pecked the tip of her ear in a soothing manner. Luna Moore, are you sick? Tell me. Luna Moore confessed everything when pressed by him. I was diagnosed with depression a month ago, and lately I haven't been able to feel happy. I don't know why. And I don't know the trigger for the illness. He listened quietly, but Luna Moore told him not to worry about it too much. Sigh. I don't know why either. Forget it. This should get better after taking medicine for a couple of days. Don't worry, he nodded. Tell her to be careful on her way to work. She then went to find her attending physician. Yes, among the main types of depression, there is a type called delayed onset depression. This condition does not manifest immediately after the trauma, but rather years later when the patient enters a relatively comfortable environment. On the other hand, your wife has a very high IQ. There are also genetic reasons for this. You need to understand that depression is not just an emotional problem. It is an abnormality in brain structure and biochemical activity. People with high IQs are twice as likely to develop depression as people with average intelligence, and it is also more difficult to cure them. However, I think it would be better to find out the real cause of the depression first. What is the real cause of Luna Moore's depression? Actually, it wasn't hard to find. He went home, looked through the newspapers, and checked the news. The detention center where Luna Moore was imprisoned 7 years ago, the director was found to have engaged in embezzlement, bribery, and torture to extract confessions. What did she suffer there? She never mentioned it to him. At that time, he was busy running around trying to find people to help her, and in order to build connections, he even forced himself to drink bottles of beer to find a reliable lawyer. He didn't have time to visit her in the detention center. He just thought she looked a little thinner when she was released. That's all. That night, Elliot Worth also suffered from insomnia. He didn't fall asleep until 6 or 7 o'clock the next morning, and he had a dream. In his dream, Luna Moore was covered in blood, impaled by 6 or 7 swords, and she smiled at him. Say you've come to see me, Elliot Worth. After that, Luna Moore's depression showed no signs of improvement. They've tried everything, taken medicine, and seen doctors. Luna Moore was still unhappy. Even more so, she often has a bad mood. There are 20 or 30 broken plates in the house. She threw it away and sat anxiously in the chair, hugging myself. Whenever this happens, he would squat down in front of her and comfort her. Don't cry, don't be unhappy. You look so beautiful today. You won't look pretty if you cry. What's bothering you? Tell me about it, okay? Sometimes, she would accidentally hurt him. A shard of the plate grazed his cheek. A thin trail of blood appeared. He rubbed it with his hand. The girl's eyes were filled with helplessness. Yes, I'm sorry. I couldn't control myself. I'm sorry. He pulled her into his arms and gently patted her head. It's okay. It's okay. Don't cry, Luna Moore. Hug me. He let her arms wrap around his neck. I'm here, Luna Moore. You like me, don't you? I'm here, at least you still have me. He smiled ingratiatingly at her. He wanted to be her light, her angel. It seemed that this gave him the courage to lead her out of the darkness. Elliot Worth wasn't very good at cooking for himself before, but after Luna Moore started contemplating suicide by turning on the gas while cooking, only Elliot Worth was allowed into the kitchen. Fortunately, Elliot Worth learns everything very quickly. Within 2 or 3 days, the food he made was already considered to be delicious and visually appealing. Luna Moore's taste is even more discerning than his. She'll eat more of what she likes and leave the rest aside. Elliot Worth went to great lengths to get her to eat more. Old Worth, you still have that ability? Miles, a bartender I met at the bar, stood with his hands behind his back and marveled at the sight. You've carved this radish into a flower. Elliot Worth chuckled and said that this was nothing. This flower was just one of many in his radish garden. He planned to name the dinner he was preparing for Luna Moore to Daydream of the Red Chamber. At this point, he remembered he needed to take out his phone to message Luna Moore. He would send Luna Moore a message every hour, and even if there was nothing to say, he would chat about something else. As for the reason, he had to make sure she was still conscious. Have you had lunch yet? You haven't had lunch yet. Don't forget. 3 minutes later, the other party sent a meme of a rabbit eating obediently. Luna Moore's memory has also started to have some problems. This is due to the side effects of electroconvulsive therapy, a treatment that uses brief vagal electrical stimulation to induce controlled electrical discharges in the brain. This is the most effective for Luna Moore at present. However, as a result, Luna Moore often felt a little dazed and began to forget some things. For example, the keys you left when you went out, or documents you forgot to put in your bag. Later, he even began to forget his conversations with Elliot Worth, forget what happened between them. He also forgot about the fact that Elliot Worth had already discovered that he had depression. That morning, she said goodbye to Elliot Worth as usual. Elliot Worth leaned against the doorframe, watching her lazily. Come home early to see me, he told her. He never expected her to end her own life. Elliot Worth realized something was wrong when he stepped off the stage after receiving his award. Before going on stage to accept the award, Elliot Worth sent a message to Luna Moore. Have you arrived at the hotel? How's the room? He accepted the award on stage, gave his speech, and stepped off the stage, but there was still no reply on his phone. In that instant, his heart sank heavily. Ignoring his manager Jack's gaze, he bowed and left the audience seats to make a phone call in a quiet backstage corridor. I dialed Luna Moore's number 3 times, but she didn't answer. He then called Luna Moore's boss, Ms. Carter. I'm sorry to bother you so late. I am Luna Moore's husband. I wanted to ask how your business trip went today. I received a reply from my boss that I had no business trip scheduled for today. He hung up the phone and started to walk out of the venue. The agent, who had run out, grabbed him from behind. Are you crazy? What are you doing here? It's an awards ceremony. A bunch of media are taking pictures of you, and you just left your seat without permission? Go back. I'm not going back. Something might have happened to Lulu. I have to go find her. No, it's you. The agent was almost choked with anger. Seeing that the person in front of him was impossible to catch, they also changed their tone. Fine, you're not going back? Elliot Worth, look behind you. This is an awards ceremony that so many people dream of. After tonight, after this interview, you'll be set for life. Announcements galore. Money, money galore. More money than you can spend. You'll become a household name overnight. Please, could you please go back and sit down? Finish the interview, okay? Trust me, your wife will be alright. So what if she doesn't reply to your messages? I sent my wife a goodnight message 3 days ago and she still hasn't replied. Elliot Worth, I beg you, look behind you. Look, so many cameras, so many newspapers, so many media outlets all waiting for you. Are you really not going to turn back? The background noise is very loud. The agent's voice was trembling. This agent had mentored countless big shots. Perhaps he was telling the truth. But Elliot Worth didn't even stop walking. Elliot Worth. That was the last time his agent called him. Actually, I never thought about becoming famous. He paused for a moment. And then we stepped back into the endless darkness. Elliot Worth bought Luna Moore a phone charm. The little rabbit holding the carrot swayed back and forth. Luna Moore loved it. Actually, it has a simple locator installed on it. Elliot Worth would only turn on the location tracking software when he could no longer find her. The software located the Hudson River Bridge in no time. The car he was driving was a Bugatti Veyron, which can reach a top speed of 407 kilometers per hour. It was Luna Moore's boss's car. Luna Moore's boss is a very decisive woman who inherited a business empire at a young age, and he managed the huge company very well. Upon hearing that he couldn't contact Luna Moore, he immediately dispatched his security team to help him expand the search and even tossed him the car keys. No car in the world can go faster than it, please. You must find Luna. Yes, he drove the world's fastest production car to chase after his girl. He must have wanted time to slow down. She was slow enough that he could catch up with her. He must have wanted time to go by faster. It will be fast enough that he won't have to endure this torment. He rushed to the Hudson River Bridge and saw a white shadow standing on the side of the bridge. She was so lonely and looked so cold. The roar of the car was like that of a giant beast. The white figure leaped down. It's a lie. No one can outrun time. Whether they're driving a Bugatti Veyron or not. He parked his car on the side of the road. He took off his suit and jumped into the river. The city's meteorological bureau just announced that temperatures will drop significantly tonight. The river water felt as if it were actually chilling to the bone. Luna Moore. He called her name, wanting to know where she was, but the night was so dark. The current was so strong that he couldn't find it, so all he could do was keep shouting. After swallowing several mouthfuls of river water, he suddenly remembered the night he had run away from the orphanage with her. It's just as cold here. He held her hand. He certainly didn't know then that they would never be apart again. He was getting too cold, and his vision began to blur. But thinking back, it was he who held her hand back then. What did he say back then? I will take you out. I will take you out. He suddenly came to his senses and waded across the river to call her name. This time he saw it. A hand reaching out from the surging river tide. He swam over with all his might and grabbed her. Hold on to her. It's as if they'll never be apart again. He pulled her out of the river. A crowd had already gathered along the river bank to watch. She said she was cold. He then hugged her. He held her, and she started to cry loudly. She cried so loudly. He had never seen her cry like that before. It was as if she was going to cry all the tears she had in her life. The police 110 and ambulance 120 that were previously called have arrived. The sirens wailed as the evening wind blew along the riverbank. But people no longer felt cold. She was still crying, as if she had suffered a tremendous injustice. All he could do was hold her and comfort her, wiping away her tears little by little. He had previously asked the doctor why humans cry. Actually, it's about releasing all the unhappy and negative emotions. Elliot Worth. It was so cold and painful when I jumped into the river. So this is what death feels like. Wah. I will never jump into the river again. Tat. I never want to die again. He patted the girl's back to help her breathe. Rest your chin on her shoulder. He looked up and saw stars shining in the distance. He thought, it seems I've caught up with time. 2 months later, Luna Moore was basically discharged from the hospital. She was full of energy after being discharged from the hospital. My legs can run again. My body is healthy again. And I'm slowly starting to smile from the bottom of my heart. The return to work was completed quickly, which made Ms. Carter extremely happy. They said the entire research institute was waiting for her to take the lead. One afternoon, Elliot Worth bought 2 cups of milk tea to pick her up from get off work. So well covered up. You're a big star. Scarf, hat, sunglasses. Luna Moore leaned closer to him and adjusted his sunglasses. He took off his sunglasses, revealing his beautiful, spring-like eyes. Sunglasses were perched on her nose. I'll give you one. Well, leave through the back door later. This is so troublesome. He led her by the hand, and she complained in a drawn-out tone as they walked. You're really popular now. All my colleagues are asking me for your autograph. Isn't it just that someone took a picture of you when you saved me and posted it online? The topic has become so popular, even more effective than a press conference. Everyone is praising you as the nation's best husband. My ideal husband. Can you carry me on your back? She now seizes every opportunity to act coquettishly towards him. Elliot Worth raised an eyebrow at her. I suddenly feel like my fractured leg hasn't fully healed yet. Luna Moore wasn't going to take it too seriously, but the next second, he was picked up horizontally by Elliot Worth, a standard princess carry. Wait a minute, she was the first to get shy. Shouldn't you be carrying me like this if your leg isn't healed? He moved closer to her, and she buried her face in his chest and didn't say a word. The spring sunshine was just right, and he carried her to the car. Neither of them said much as the spring breeze blows. Remain humble and composed. The rapeseed flowers planted in the yard attracted butterflies to flutter around. She gripped his scarf tightly in her hand. Suddenly, her muffled voice came from inside the scarf. Thank you, Elliot Worth. Thank you for saving me that day, We don't say thank you here. Then what should we say? Say I love you. End of article.